Right, so the next thing we're going to deal with is the outline of the foam. In order to do that, we're going to go to Gaussian spots. So Gaussian spots 1. Now, I'm actually going to Control C and Control V. I'm making a copy because I'm going to use this node in 2 different ways. So this one we're going to save for later. This one we're going to use now. Actually, I'm going to show you this because I forgot about this and I reminded myself when I made this mistake. So it's an easy mistake to make. And again, it has to do with tiling. Transform 2D is an awesome node. And you can go down here and you can, change your widths and your heights. Now, if you go down, let's say, for example, 50% on each side, right? Apply width, apply height. It's tiling beautifully. I mean, it has absolutely no problems tiling. If you go, so we went down 50, so let's go up 150. My math sucks, but this should work. I'm clicking here now, I'm hitting space. It's starting to have problems tiling. You can see where you're beginning to get lines. And that's because it's not, if you really want to properly tile, you need to go and you need to get a noise upscale. That will correctly tile it for you to make it, well, actually to make it smaller. To make it bigger, it worked for this in this particular situation. What I ended up doing was, instead of scaling it up with a transform 2D, I brought this way down to 16 by 16. And this gave me this big, let's get rid of that. This gave me that, which actually works because what we're going to be doing is we want these vague spots to wiggle around, and it worked really well. What we're going to do here is we're going to take disorder and we're going to create an empty function. And this is very simple. We're going to add a node, variables, get float, add node operator multiplication, and add node constant float. So in my notes, I had this as function time multiplied by 2. We can always change it later. That's what I ended up having, and we right click and set this as the output node. So this actually worked out really well. Now obviously every situation is different, so it might not work out in other things that you need, but it's worth doing. It's worth taking a look at, because if it's something that doesn't really require a lot of, I don't know, exactitude, it should work fine. Now I'm going to just do the same idea where we're going to take that same image and we are going to turn it 90 degrees. Doesn't matter the direction. And we're going to blend the two together just like we did in the previous video. And we are going to lighten. And now we're going to bring it up to, we brought it down by 4, we're going to bring it up by 4. And we're back to 256 by 256, and it looks pretty good. This was actually pretty close to what I had gotten when I had taken a transform and upped it up. Only this time, it tiles properly. So, I mean, I knew that and I forgot. and I got halfway through the thing and I'm like, oh man. So, and it was looking really nice and I really liked the way it looked, and then all of a sudden I realized it wasn't tiling properly. So I had to go back and see whether that would work, and it did. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to invert grayscale, because we kind of want this sort of stringy look to it. So we're going for the stringy bits, not the white bits. And let's get that more. Like that. Yeah, so, you know, what do I want my foam to look like? That's probably more than I had before. But again, this would be something that if you wanted to control this would be the node that you would expose. So let's leave it around there for now. Right. So that's the basic shape of it. And it's, you know, it'll move around, but we want it to look more liquidy. So again, we're gonna, because it's not something that's coming up to the edge a lot, you know, we're really dealing mostly with black here. I'm gonna go ahead and warp it because I know that's gonna work for me, because it's not something that's, you know, requires hard edges. Again, I'm trying to cut down on the amount of, oh yeah, this is actually where I brought it in. We had done some other things to it. Let's leave this warp node alone for now. We're going to use now this second Gaussian spots 1 to do something else. Had to change pages on my notes. Okay, what we're dealing with now, okay, right now, this outline is going to be the basic, I mean, it's the main component of the basic mask that we're going to be using for the foam. I did a lot of experimentation with bringing it down and doing it like bringing like this foamy detail, which is what we're going to be working on here. So this is the basic shape, and we're going to be kind of working on the like foamy detail to make it look more like foam as opposed to like solid blobs. And at first I was bringing it into the normal channel, and it didn't look right. And it didn't really look right in the height either. So what I ended up doing, it made it look more solid by creating a normal for the foamy bits of the foam, which I thought a normal would actually do the trick. It did the opposite. It made it look more, it actually made it look solid, like it was floating on top of the water. And that's not the effect that I wanted. So I ended up doing this. What we're about to do is actually only going to apply to the color. And that's how it seemed to work, and I left the normal and the height alone. And what we're going to try to do with this one is, well, we're going to, how to explain this? I think we're just going to start doing it. We're going to, first of all, warp this against itself, which is a great way of flattening stuff out. Except intensity, that looks completely different than what I have. I need to check something. Hold on a second. Yeah, I forgot something. Let's go back to this one too, because I did it for both of them. I actually brought down this pixel size. And what this does is the pixel size talks about the space between each pixel. So if you've got it all the way up here, they're all squished up right up against each other. They're super dense. And the lower this number becomes, the larger that space between pixels becomes. And I had it, now sometimes, I mean, it does affect, and let's take a look. Sometimes it affects things, sometimes it doesn't. It absolutely makes things leaner. And I had this set to 0.4, 0.04, and 0.04, and now it's exactly what I wanted it to be. So this is a much denser picture than this. So that's what this pixel size is talking about. So it will lean things out for you. And sometimes you can't visually tell. For example, like imported bitmaps that you've made in Photoshop, you can lower those down, and there's really very little effect that you can see. With these effects maps, it's more prominent. You can see it. It's much easier to see the difference, but it may be a difference that you want. So again, you know, pays to fool around with that a little bit. Okay, so we've got this. What we're trying to do is basically I want to create like a ring. I want to create like these ring things because I want to be able to control like this outside, which I want to have more opaque, and an inside, which I'm going to want to have less opaque, to have it look more like a bubble. I don't know what you would call that, but anyway, that's the look I want. So we're all going to base it off of these Gaussian spots, excuse me. I'm going to make a mask first. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to bleach it right out. So get it really masky looking. So this is really want it pretty tight. Okay. So this is our basic masks. Now we want something that's a little bit wider also for a mask, because we're going to need two masks to do this. So I'm now going to make a mask that is a little bit wider. And let me just see what I had it intensity set at 20. Again, you can test this out by actually, oh yeah, we have to make a level on this first. So right now I've got these blurry edges, and now I'm going to take these edges, and just like I did here with this levels on these Gaussian spots 1, I'm going to kind of do the same thing here, where I'm going to sort of straighten them out a little bit. And again, it's going to make it bigger as I do that. And the right one. Yeah, there we go. So we now, if we double click on, well, we've got this mask. Now if I double click on this mask, it's the same mask, only a little bit smaller. So that's exactly what I want. And now we're going to set up a blend, and we're going to use these two. So we set up the smaller mask, because we're going to use a smaller mask for what's going on up here. So that's the stuff that's going on up top. So those are our actual Gaussian spots that are now moving around, and they're being blocked out by the smaller mask. Now underneath them, we now have this larger, because we took this, we blurred it out, which made it bigger, and then we kind of sharpened the edges again, and it gives us this wacky ring. I hope that's clear. It's kind of like making a little cookie cutter, I guess. And so we have control with this levels over what's going on the lower layer, and all we need to do now, I'm going to highlight this, and all I have to do is click, and it will add that levels in here. we can now adjust using this levels what's going on that ring under, no, sorry, on the stuff on top. So I actually want to see that a bit darker. I don't want it quite that opaque. So I'm going to just take the whole thing and darken it down. And again, you could, this is the kind of thing you can expose if you want. And then again, I could use a noise upscale and it would probably look a lot cooler if I did. Because this is a very, you know, it's like a very detail-y thing. But like I said, I'm trying to keep this really lean. So I'm going to get a transform 2D. And I came to this size by experimenting. I ended up with 12.5%, but I actually brought it down. The way I figured it out was I did 50% by 50%, and I applied it, and then I halved it, I took a look at it, and then I halved it again. And what I came up with, just to save you the trouble, was 12.5%. But again, that's not a right or wrong answer. That's just what I ended up with. And now that's terribly sharp, and so we're going to blur that out again. I had it set, I'm just doing the settings I had, which was 6.72. But again, don't, these settings aren't set in stone, no pun intended. This is a personal thing. So again, we're making a mask here. So what I do want to do as the sort of last section of this is I really want to get that more contrasty, because right now as a mask this doesn't really work very well. So again, we're going to just slide everything up, get rid of all that dead space, and that should be fine. Right, so let me switch pages on my notes here. Oh, and this now, no, where am I? Hold on a second. Yeah, if you got the right page of notes open, it's usually works better. Okay, so we've got that done, and before we go any further, now I'm just going to take this and I'm going to plug this in as the warp on that. And yeah, that little bit warpier. What did I, oh, I had it set higher, that's why. Okay, I had it set like 1.5. Let's see if that's any better. Yeah, I just want to crinkle up those edges. It could probably even go higher. Again, every time you do this, it's different. So again, I'm wanting to just break it up. Right. Now the last, I want to do one more mask. One more warp, sorry. And I want to use my water, like the underneath water, as my mask, or as the whatever, what do they call it, the input that it's warping against. I forget what the name is. And so what that's going to do is that as these waves go up and down in the normal and in the height, it's going to also affect, it gives it a more of a naturalistic look. Okay, so at this point we're pretty much getting ready to put this all together. Let me see where I am. Okay, so what we've got here, this final one right here, is sort of the mask one, if you will. I'm going to get another levels, and I'm careful not to put it on top of this. I didn't want it to join it. And I want to make it bigger. So I'm going to adjust it slightly where it's got more of a, not even so much more whiteness, but more spread. A little bit more whiteness. this, but so again, I'm going to, because this is what we're going to be using sort of as the bigger mask that's gonna sort of affect most of the height, etc. And this one we're going to use for the color. So we'll get to that later. Okay. First, let's set up our normals because that's just quick and easy. So we're going to get another normal mask, and then we're going to set that up, not forgetting to do fill alpha with input, and I had this set at about, I think, 22. And then it's just a question of just doing an overlay of the two of them. All right. So that's the normal sorted out. The height, again, what we want to do here, I'm going to bring down 2 level nodes because each one of these, it's going to get its own sort of tone control. We've got the water, like the underlying water, and then we've got this this height that we're using this one as the height because we're not going to be using this detail for the height here. So we'll put this one on top, we'll put this one underneath, and we're going to use a lightness blend here. So what really wants to happen here is kind of helping along. We do want that foam a little bit higher. This actually looks pretty good. We want that foam a little bit higher than the waves because we kind of want it to stand up a little bit. So this is where we would adjust that. Yeah, like that. And we can plug that into our height. And at this point, we'll probably even do our roughness map. And this is super duper easy because, again, we're going to use that same basic mask that we're using. And we want the foam to be slightly less glossy or slightly more rough rather than the water. So this is pretty much right. We just want to take the whole thing down several notches. And that's that. And there will be no metallic, so that stays the same. So the only thing we have left to do now is the color. You know what, maybe we should probably take a look at this before we go any further. Well, let's see what happens. I don't know if it's going to make, probably should just add the color, but let's see what's going on here. So we've got an awful long way of me just following my notes without testing it out, which very often doesn't end well. Yeah, that doesn't look right. Well, maybe it does. With the color, we'll see. But yeah, I think maybe it is right. But things are wiggling around. Okay. Let's continue with the color. We're actually almost there. Again, we're going to just get another gradient. And it's exactly the same idea. I'm going into the gradient editor. I'm going to get up here on the gradient. And we're going to just choose, again, another blue. More turquoisey, but you know, like almost white, because this is the foam. So we're going to go from that, and then this one, I don't want it exactly white, but, you know, like that. So it's pretty much white on white. And now this is where we start to, Yeah, this, let me leave that here. It's kind of, we're all getting scrunched up. Let me move this up here. Okay. We have to do one more blend here in order to put together, or wait, blend. In order to put together this stuff with this stuff. And so I'm using the larger one as the mask for this stuff because the let me just put that in before I'm gonna, so that's this one that goes in here. So and then the smaller one goes in here. We want the larger mask on the bottom because it's dealing with this sort of niggly stuff, this color, these niggly color changes. If I made the mask exactly the same size as the smaller of these two masks, this spotty stuff would end here. I kind of wanted to go over the edges. So it's kind of the same idea as what we did here. I'm making it bigger, and then I'm putting the one that I want to kind of flow out over the smaller mask on top, and it uses the mask that's sort of poofier. So this now comes out over the edges of the smaller mask. And what kind of blend did I use here? I don't know. What we got here right now, it should be lighten. No, or dark, I don't know. Let me take a look at what I had in the other one. Hold on. Yep, it's lighten. It just seems lighter. But again, I've never ever gotten these things to look the same. You know, I'll fool around with it later. And then this is what we're using for the mask. Oh, wait a minute, where's my gradient? Oh, I forgot to do the gradient. I used the larger mask because again, we want the gradient to be picked up by the mask. So that is what I use for my color. We need another blend. And now we have this on top of that. And because it's color, well, I'm not going to, well, we could, let's, okay. Just because I'm really not digging the color that I made with this first gradient, and I can't be bothered to fool around with it in the gradient editor, I'm going to go ahead and put a hue, saturation, lightness in there. And then we plug that in there. So that now gives us that color map. So this sort of, this is the, if you have this as the normal and the height, it's just too much. It doesn't work. So that's why we only put it on the color. And let's try it now. Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's different from the one that I had. I don't like it quite so much. I hate the colors. The opacity is all wrong. I think this is almost half an hour. I mean, this is it. It's done. At this point, it's just a question of tweaking it. So I'll go ahead and make another video tweaking it. Like the size is all wrong and stuff. But it seems to be working according to plan at this point. So I'm going to stop it here, and one more to turn it into something that looks more like water.